welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to see how well you know the rules of Smash Up. I'm going to introduce another Titan, one that had been previously hinted at if you solved the Mega Puzzle. Now the Mega Puzzle was really involved, and it's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay, because no Crank It Up follower is better than any other. This Titan is special and unique for two big reasons: its rather elaborate entry criteria, and the fact that it is impossible, and I mean impossible, to judge this Titan without playing many games with it. And I'm going to prove that by stating up front that, at least right now, I somewhat like this Titan. In the big picture sense, at least. At many points throughout this video, you won't think that I do, but I'm telling you the truth. I like it. That's really surprising, because this Titan made me audibly angry when I first saw that Mad Scientists were getting a Titan. Mad Scientists were previously featured as my most underrated faction, but being an underrated faction in my eyes seems to be a curse given the history of others. But in doing that video, I got to see a lot of perspectives about Mad Scientists and what they are supposed to be, and the answer is pretty complicated. Are they a headliner? Are they a support? Are they strictly swarm support? As we discuss where Mad Scientists went wrong, what they need, and what this Titan gives them, we have to question if the Mad Scientists came up short or comparable factions went too far. The key to this video is using my own logic against me, and when you do that and you take the emotion and personal perspective out of the mix, Mad Scientists probably should get a Titan. They have always been top heavy with a high ceiling and low floor, and if the goal of the Titan is to raise the floor and make them more consistent, or stand out against more modern power counter factions, I understand that. Truthfully, Igor isn't that great. He is another 2 who becomes a 3, but in a convoluted way, and it's easy for Igor to be dead. They break the Sonus rule, but interestingly enough, each of the Sonai has the same issue, that of what I call pre-nerfing. I don't think I have time to go into pre-nerfing in detail, but for a relevant example, read Jackson Hogan's recent comments about Pinkerton in the Cowboy video. Lab Assistant and the Doctor cannot give the power counter to themselves. Not that you would always want to, but you should be able to. My preference is to give them to the monster, but if you have only those minions, you are wasting the ability for a turn. There are a lot of schools of thought on the Doctor and whether it is appropriate for a leader ability. Is the Doctor too weak, or is Odysseus too nuts? That's a philosophical issue. Maybe the answer is somewhere in between. But regardless, we have leaders who eclipse the Doctor easily, especially since he cannot power himself up, and faction context wants you to. As far as the actions go, I really like most of them. Uber Serum is a classic and plays well into their strategy. It's Alive is one of the best summons in the game. German Engineering is a nice burst card that suits the monster well and can be used to avoid power creep. Jolt is great, Angry Mob is great, Blitzed is a card, Body Shop is amazing. The only one worth mentioning is Grave Situation, which has been, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, absolutely butchered by its clarificata. It blocks Igor and blocks other destruction benefits, and in hindsight was the beginning of closing the destruction loophole. In fact, it's a little ironic for the destruction loophole to be deemed too strong, yet one of the best factions with the destruction loophole gets the Titan. But as far as their minions go, when 8 out of 10 have relevancy issues, that is noticeable, and it is a problem. Particularly their top-heavy nature stems from the lack of card draw, which hurts their consistency. Normally that is fixed by your partner, but perhaps the goal is to make all factions capable of winning while being partner agnostic. I think that part of the issue is the monster expansion itself. This is now the first expansion to have every faction retroactively get a Titan. In the monster-only context, vampires don't look as bad. If they were balanced against themselves as a set, the gap is closer, because early Smash Up put an emphasis on set balance over system balance. That may have kept Mad Scientists from getting what they needed to survive the test of time, and 2 Titan packs, the Marvel and Disney Strength Plus, and the rise of TDAC aren't making it easier. So while I don't think they needed one before, if others are getting an upgrade, then for me, that would push Mad Scientists onto the warning track, so it is good that they got a Titan. Assuming, of course, you could actually play it. This will be the area of hit or miss for the bride, because it is really complicated, and if I show you the ability without explanation, you're going to get it wrong, and I'm probably going to get part of this wrong because it's convoluted and not explained anywhere, but I've had extensive conversations with others about this, so if we are all wrong, then so be it. This Titan tests how well you know Smash Up's timing and resolution, because it throws a major curveball in what I think is the game's first do X and Y to do Z. That's right, 2 preconditions, and this doesn't work like you think it does, especially since this is never explained in the crazy rulebook because the situation hadn't come up. You are given a list of 3 things to do. You need to box a minion you own from your hand or discard, you need to successfully destroy one of your minions, and you need to remove a power counter from one of your minions. Specifically, you need to do 2 out of 3 in any order, but that is incredibly misleading because they should be order agnostic. The best way I can describe it is that there is a virtual validation check that ensures you can do both before you actually do both, and I did find a combination of things that would lead to a temporal paradox, but that's an exercise for you to take home. Unless you can do both, you do neither, and you need to do both to play the Titan, which must come into play if you do both. Did you catch all that? So because of that, you must be able to prove that you can do 2, then do them, then play the Titan. And on top of all that, you need to do them to 2 different minions, and this is going to be really controversial because with respect to options 1 and 2, there are 2 schools of thought. Those of us who believe the rules and the official stance. When does a minion become a different minion? Can you destroy a minion, then box it? When it leaves play, it loses all memory of its previous status, right? So doesn't that make it a different minion? No, apparently. And though I don't really understand why, I think it has to do with the informal prevalidation check, which ends up hurting this faction a lot, and no one suffers more than Igor. The Hydra timing has always been convoluted because the modified rules really don't give any examples of this whatsoever, so I'll start with a simple example. You play Wildebeest Stampede and destroy an Igor with an intent to grab and play the monster. What happens first, playing the monster or Igor? By convention and precedent, it's the monster. Even though Igor is destroyed first, it does not resolve until the card that destroyed it is finished resolving. So in that case, Igor could actually put the counter on the monster. And it is that exact timing that blows up the timing on the bride. It means you cannot destroy an Igor in play and then use that counter as the counter you remove to fulfill the second condition. So in the simplest sense, there are 3 combinations of abilities, AB, BC, and AC. We started by showing that BA doesn't work because it'd be considered the same minion. BC doesn't work because of the timing. That leaves AC as your most likely bet, even though the others are possible, but the general point is that this Titan is incredibly difficult to play because the odds are stacked against it. One of the nice things about boxing from your hand is that it is turn agnostic and requires no setup, you just do it. But removing the power counter, how does that happen? You can't leverage Igor, but you really can't leverage Lab Assistant either, because Lab Assistant cannot place the counter on itself. It has to place it on someone else. Mathematically, your most likely minions are Igor and Lab Assistant, 7 out of 10, and there is no order in which you can play them on successive turns that brings out this Titan in a way that would make sense for your game plan. If you place the counter on Igor with Lab Assistant, then Igor cannot be the minion you destroy, so you'd have to destroy Lab Assistant and get nothing for it. So your best bet is to use Lab Assistant to place a counter on Igor and hope that you have a minion to box from your hand. Often players will ask, can a Titan make a faction worse? And I need to be honest, this Titan absolutely has that potential, and for a long time I thought it was actually true. It is very costly to play, and you have to arrange your turn specifically to play it, which alters your game plan. And the effect may not be worth it right away, so it takes time to break even unless you are boxing from your hand. Otherwise, you are losing too much board position. And the fact that this Titan is at the start of turn does not do it any favors. Before I say too much else about the entry criteria, I'll take a break and mention the ongoing. Once per turn, after you place or remove a power counter from one of your minions, you get to draw a card. Mad scientists need card draw. While I don't want every faction getting card draw, they need it. Now Igor was not able to place the counter for the bride to remove, but the bride was in play before Igor resolves, so does the bride get to react to the counter? Well, if the answer is anything other than no, then I want my counter back on Gorgonzola, because this is pretty clear in the Disney rules. For an ability, in this case the bride, to respond to a trigger, Igor, its card, the bride, needs to be in play when Igor is destroyed, and it is not. That unless clause only applies to the bride leaving play, not entering play. So you cannot rely on the counter to draw a card, because Igor manages to strike out on both sides of the timing. If you are still with me, congratulations. I did warn you up front, this Titan is a giant rules test. You can argue that it shouldn't matter because they have other means of placing counters, but you would be amazed at how your cards may not line up effectively and efficiently. If you have free counters, like the Doctor or German Engineering, you are in luck. But if you have to burn a lab assistant when you don't want to, or an action, it really hurts. The fallback plan is that the bride herself can place a power counter, but only on a minion here. While the Titan can be played anywhere, its power counter is localized. Now this is a mixed bag, because the Titan is so hard to bring out, you should be placing it on an empty base. But then, you can't use its talent very effectively. But the talent adds power creep, but it also protects the Titan from clashing, because clashing feels awful with this Titan. Can you imagine losing board presence this severely, only to see the Titan wiped off the board the next turn? You need to position this Titan extremely carefully, and be cognizant of clashing at all times. But this is another 2.5 box Titan, because there's an OR. You can remove 2 counters to play an extra action. This is pretty severe, given how difficult it is to bring the bride into play, and I must admit that this entire Titan screamed fear to me. It screamed mixed messaging. Like the game wanted to give Mad Scientist a Titan, but were too afraid to let it do anything, and part of me still feels that way. So why do I like this Titan? For 2 reasons. It does give them card draw, which they need, and because it gives them a chance internally to do their big play, Angry Mob and Body Shop. Previously, you needed an extra action from a base or partner to do it, and this lets them achieve their highest upsides regardless of their circumstances. And that play is dumping a bunch of cards with Angry Mob and body shopping an Uber Serum minion for a multi-base attack. This is where the Doctor's limitation really hurts them. You can play the Doctor and Uber Serum for only a 5 power footprint. Then, at the start of your turn, you gain a counter for Uber Serum and you are at 6 with 10 cards. You Angry Mob 8 of them for +8, and then you body shop for 14 power, going anywhere. If the Doctor could hit itself, then it would be an 8, and now you are body shopping for a total of 16. That's 32 power, capable of knocking out 2 bases with minions spread everywhere, which Mad Scientists want to do anyway. Of course, you need to factor in the reduction of 2 counters for the action, but one of those counters can be from the bride herself, and the bride draws 2 cards over the process, so maybe it evens out. It's just complicated. But I have to remind myself that I started from a position that they didn't need one, and giving them a straight up action would be insane, so there needs to be some cost, I just don't know what it is. But I said in the beginning that this Titan is a rules test, and I'm going to argue something insane in a moment. But first, to understand what I'm about to say, we need to talk about a bandit pet peeve, which is not a rule because there aren't enough examples to be a rule, so it remains a pet peeve. I don't like it when a card has a once per turn limitation that it itself triggers. It's just easier to combine it with the trigger. But the advantage is that it can trigger outside your turn under the right circumstances, and what I'm about to say is definitely not intentional, but I believe strongly that this should work because of what is actually written in the rules. When a card leaves play, remove all +1 counters on it. The bride ongoing says after you remove it, but who does the removal? The only possible candidates are you or circumstance. If you argue that circumstance removes the counters, then you'd also have to argue that circumstance places the counter with laboratorium and that it wouldn't trigger the bride, and I don't think many people would make that argument. Going by the actual rule, that would imply that the bride would trigger when a power countered minion leaves play on other turns. And if you don't agree, come on. Hasn't this Titan been through enough already? Except in extreme cases, Smash Up goes by wording, not intent, and the wording here in my opinion supports this. There is the question of credit obviously, and the rules do not do a good job of explaining instances of non-player credit. But if Laboratorium can give credit, then the removal should work the same way. Also, So-So Corral says to destroy the losing minion, but the clarification explicitly assigns credit to the challenging player. Tar Pits and Temple of Goju assigns credit to the minion owners. I believe the default position is that players get credit unless extreme circumstances say otherwise, like the base playing a monster. And I would also argue that, if you can find related precedents like I have, an interaction should work until it explicitly does not, and that the game should prioritize interactions over non-interactions because interactions are fun. I have scoured all the rulebooks and have not found anything to contradict the precedents set by other bases. So I will play this way until I am told otherwise, at which point I will argue incessantly. I get that it is a very esoteric situation pending expert rule thinking, but you'll probably want to make your own determination. I did want to circle back to the entry criteria because there is an important phenomenon that you may not believe until you experience it yourself. This Titan is impossible to play if you have a great draw. Yes, it is impossible to play if you start the game with a great draw. Consider the criteria. If you drew well, you will have nothing you want to destroy and nothing you want to box. When those minions go to the discard, they are still good minions, and you wouldn't risk boxing them if you had access to recursion, even from bases. You would think that this is a good thing, that mad scientists are hitting their ceiling, but it's actually a very bad thing because of Titan inflation. It means that the Titan will come out with mid-game instead of using that early momentum, and if you aren't winning early, it's really hard to come back. This happened to me twice in successive games. I have the Doctor and Monster, and really want that card draw engine for minions from Monster to play, but I have no means of bringing out the Bride. I can still spread out, but if you start drawing excessive actions, you lose your ability to put some breathing room into the score, and it could be a struggle since parity combos are so strong. And if you don't draw any minions, you won't be able to have the plays to bring out the Bride, which would give you the card draw to overcome the fact that you aren't drawing any minions. So it's tough on both sides. Again, this might not sink in until you experience it yourself, because this Titan generally requires 3 turns to have passed to be played on average, and it's even longer with your best cards. Also, if you drew well early, the bad minions are still coming, so you can't take advantage of an overdraw situation. It's a uniquely weird phenomenon. You need your draw to be the right mix of good and bad to play the Bride early, and until you try it yourself, you won't be able to gauge its effectiveness. I know I spent a ton of time on the entry criteria, but that's because I may be your best source of information, and despite all the craziness with it, I do like this Titan, at least right now. It's a challenge to bring into play, and can absolutely be a net loss, but it can also let them achieve their amazing plays. This video has been long enough, so I will forego specifying combos, but I would say that this just makes Mad Scientist slightly more viable in the everyday sense. This video is a lot, and may require a rewatch, so I'm glad you stuck around. This is my most played Titan for obvious reasons, and my opinion changed several times already, but this is what it is now. I still like it somewhat, and I hope you will too. I'm eager to know your first impressions, but anyone who claims authority on its value without playing it is fooling themselves, because this Titan is super complicated. So what are those first impressions? Let me know in the comments. There may not be a video next week, so if not, I'll see you at the day of smashing. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down.